Hello, all, and welcome to Bring Your Own Chair, a CX Accelerator podcast. This unique resource is all about you, the CX professional who is out there navigating your career journey. We've got so many incredible people in this community who care deeply about equipping the next generation of CX leaders, and we are bringing them to you. Whether you're looking for encouragement,
but there's no more important time than now to learn the skills, the talent, get the advice and mentorship you need to be able to demonstrate your ROI.
Equipping.
How do you develop your frontline supervisors so that they really are focused on results and relationships?
Or connection.
And I loved it, as crazy as that is, but I only loved it because I had support from the community.
We've got a space for you at this table. So grab your chair and let's welcome our host, Sally Mildren.
Hello and welcome to Bring Your Own Chair, a podcast by the CX Accelerator community. It's a nonprofit that is set up and designed to help CX professionals at any stage of their career to grow, to expand, and be at the top of their game. I'm Sally Mildren, your host. I'm the CEO and Chief Strategist of Clarity PX. We're a boutique agency that helps small and rural healthcare to really grow through aligned brand, experience, and culture. We're so excited about today's message. We are talking today with our guest who has a 30-plus year career in CX. And it started with a little old task of being chair of a 12-country, 6-division task force to design the customer satisfaction methodology for that organization. Whew, talk about a big first project. But she has deep expertise in CX, in voice of the customer, in customer satisfaction, corporate quality, and leadership. And she provides amazing insights that will benefit anyone in CX. Lynn Hunsaker is CEO of Clear Action, a customer experience consultancy that grows businesses by centering on the customer's well-being. In her work, she is aiming for automatic experience excellence. She's recognized as a seasoned customer experience thought leader, an author. She's an educator, a transformationist, an ROI strategist, and innovator. And we're really thrilled to have you here today. Thanks for being with us today, Lynn.
It's my pleasure. Thanks so much for inviting me.
I'd like to ask this question to start with all our guests is, what led you to CX? It's not, especially in 91.
Yeah.
It wasn't so common everywhere. So how'd you get here?
Right. Well, it was actually more common than you think at that time, but I started my career after my MBA in the strategic planning department as a strategic information manager. And part of that involved going out to our customers across North America and interviewing them to find out how they viewed our performance versus our competitors versus their expectations as a bracket on each dimension of the experience, and value. What was the value for the price paid? And based on all of that insight, we adapted our corporate strategy accordingly, which I think is kind of rare today. Wouldn't it be wonderful if more companies or every company did that?
Right.
So after a couple of years, they said, look, we're doing a total quality management initiative, and part of that is customer satisfaction. You're already doing that. Why don't you help us figure out exactly what it means in this context of TQM and lead a task force to figure it out? Because we were in a rural location, even though we were a Fortune 250 company, they wanted me to go and research what it means instead of just figuring it out and doing it because I'm a smart person, which was the way people do in Silicon Valley later on in my career. But I had the luxury of going to visit John Goodman, for example, in Washington, D.C., who is very renowned for all these studies on customer satisfaction, customer service, as well as many other companies and providers. So that was really the start of it. And I began speaking at conferences in 1992, the second annual AMA ASQ Customer Satisfaction Conference, for example.
That is awesome. I There's so many ways we can go with this conversation. We talked a lot about a lot of things, and I thought, well, this could be a 3-hour episode, but we're trying not to do that today.
Yeah.
One of the things in our setup conversation for this podcast, you talked a lot about how listening to the voice of the customer, and some of the work you just described is that sometimes we get it wrong. And there were a few things that stood out to me that I thought were so interesting. You said that when we're listening to the voice of the customer, particularly with anything, but now you're talking about global, so cultural differences, geographic differences, all the things. One of the things that you said before was that when we're going after the voice of the customer, we need to learn to ask more interesting questions. And I loved that conversation because you talked about how we're asking the wrong questions when we're going after finding out what the customers really want or like or need. And often it's more about us than about them. So can you talk about that a little bit and maybe share
Yeah.
some examples for us that how can we be more interesting and where are we going wrong with that?
Right. I mean, the way that things started for me, the dynamics in America were that we had very strong competition from Japan.
Mhm.
Sony Walkman, for example, although consumer electronics were being taken over by Japanese brands as a preference of American consumers.
Mhm.
Also, the American steel industry, semiconductor industry, automotive industries were facing really tremendous competition from Japan. Essentially, we were just kind of getting too big for our britches here in America. The government as well started a national quality award, and customer satisfaction and customer focus in leadership were really strong parts of that. So the whole idea of doing customer experience research early in the 1990s was, how do we make our products and services and our policies and behaviors more in tune with what customers value?
Mhm.
So we were really looking at how can we apply customer insights to getting ahead of the curve and rising above the strong competition and becoming favored again among our own citizens as well as other markets. So I think that has kind of gone by the wayside with this whole notion of would you recommend us and how many people can we get to recommend us, and tout that in public relations and for all of our compensation and whatnot. It's become kind of its own animal, and I actually have declined now to answer those surveys because I just don't feel like it's doing anything. I don't think that it's really helping me or them, and it's not about me. What I
Right.
would like to answer is things about what I want, ideas that I have that could help them, things that came to my mind during my experience that I felt, hey, I wish they knew this. That would be cool if they did it. So we need to be doing more expectations VOC in addition to realities VOC.
That's so good. I love that. And I think as I think on my career and even the conversations we've had on the podcast previous, there is a lot of chatter in our accelerator community around surveys, surveying, all that kind of thing. But we've had a lot of talk about how do you increase your value? How do you create that burning platform for CX and increase your value as a professional within the organization? And I think that this question is tied to that because
Mm,
if we're just saying, how many stars do you give us? That's not really getting at actionable data to make service changes or to make product changes or whatever. I think that's super interesting. What other kinds of questions or things come to mind for you that might be something that would be more important for us to get at to really improve the experience and not just feel good about ourselves?
right. So most people are looking for quick wins. They're looking for what to work on by buying putting a large amount of their budget or maybe even 100% of their budget on a technology provider.
Mhm.
and then seeing what the data says and getting kind of wrapped around the wheel on this inner closed loop. They
Mhm.
never get to the outer closed loop, and it's really not necessary. It's not a really wise path to go because you already have customer insights on hand. For
Mhm.
example, what customers are telling you in customer service, start there and get a plan before you go and blow your budget with one-stop shopping, which really isn't true.
Right.
You need to be more thoughtful about how you're allocating your budget to all the needs. And how do you figure out the needs? Pay attention to almost free VOC that you have coming into your salespeople, your service people, whoever is interfacing with customers. Even if you have a retail environment, do some research with the people who interface with your customers.
Right.
So, for example, if you have a way to review customer comments from these sources, even manually is doable. But
Yeah.
if you could buy data mining or voice mining, that would be my first purchase if
Mhm.
I were in your shoes. So, at any rate, whether you're just starting out or you've already been doing this for quite a long time, pay attention to what customers are saying to you as, I'm trying to do X, but now Y happened and Z is my consequence. There's
Mhm.
hardly any kind of survey you can do that will tell you that.
Right.
Furthermore, a lot of these technologies can tell you a lot about tone of voice,
Right.
pace of voice, words used. Pay attention to, first of all, what are the things that change people's emotions?
Mhm.
What are those triggers in their story for being happier or
Mhm.
being frustrated? And then those are actually the moments of truth,
Right.
right? And if you're seeing prevalent issues, those are the things that you should start with, not necessarily quick wins, but what you should do is, I mean, quick wins aren't bad, but you need to make sure that if you're addressing prevalent issues, if you really want to get high ROI and be super impressive to the executives. So how
Sure.
you do it is you just take those prevalent issues and say, how much is this costing us? Yeah,
Mhm.
you don't have to be complete, but you can just say, hey, for these customer service calls that have come in the past month on this one prevalent issue, we can calculate that it's costing us X dollars to address this just in customer service. Now, when you add on escalation, remedies, negative word of mouth that's out there, that now we have to do more in our sales and marketing to make up
Mhm.
for that negative word of mouth. Churn, that's also more marketing and sales dollars. So you're kind of like piling up this story, but you're just using a nugget of the cost.
Mhm.
And that will turn your executives on much more than any other study, benchmarking report, or quick win that you can give, because they'll think, my heavens, I never thought of it like that. I had no idea that it was that amount. What if we could get to the root of it and stop those costs and put that money that would have gone to addressing that same prevalent issue next month, next year, 10 years from now, still the same prevalent issue? It happens. But what if you could stop that and redirect that budget and those resources, those people and whatnot,
Mhm.
to something more constructive, a higher value opportunity for everyone? I call that customer experience annuities.
Ah,
And I found that executives really love that, and it really takes a lot of the pressure off of you for revenue uptick. Redirect them to preventing these kind of insane costs.
that's so good. And I can even say in my own career when I try to bring a McKinsey number or a Forrester number or a Gardner number or whatever, it's just kind of really you're giving me a research paper. It's not as motivating to your point as, hey, this issue keeps coming up. I calculated that in our department alone, it's costing $400,000 a month. And then all of a sudden they're like, holy cow,
Exactly.
that
Yeah.
is a lot of money. And we can do something about it. And at the same time, improve customer experience. So I
Mhm.
love that you talked about the negative word of mouth. And in our conversation before, you talked about those as hidden costs.
Mhm.
And I think that it's too easy to forget about that repercussion. You think about the one survey metric or the one KPI that you're striving for. And it's interesting to me when we were talking, you were talking about, I take a look at what is the cost to serve a customer. And when I calculate that with what I think it costs, sometimes it costs more when we are accounting for those hidden things that are really dissatisfiers or really are unspoken, maybe emotional needs or maybe practical needs or whatever. And so, where do you think, is it the same place that people are going to find that information? That kind of, what are the triggers? What words are they using? Where else can they look to be aware to the whole scope of the cost to take care of
Mhm.
the customer? Where?
Right. So I found that when you pay attention to customer comments and try to understand what's behind those comments more,
Mhm,
it leads your curiosity to do other types of research where you're maybe looking at what people are saying in social media, what
mhm,
are they saying informally at the trade show, the symposium for your industry or whatever, being more of a fly on the wall to capture those things, spending time with your customer facing people to understand what they're noticing in body language and
mhm.
tone of voice and, under the breath comments and whatnot that you're never really going to get directly.
Right.
Um, and furthermore, a lot of people think that if you do qualitative research like ethnography, which is observing customers where they're doing stuff, it's
Mhm,
just going to be, outrageously costly. But it's
mhm,
not really true. When I've done exploration research of any type, usually I found that if I focus on a type of customer and collecting sufficient data from them, I really have all I need after maybe 9 to 12 interviews with that type of customer. If
right.
I'm getting a lot more new information after 12 interviews, it means that I have 2 types of customers,
Right.
right? So that really, makes it much more doable when you
Mhm,
start to get all repetitive information that you've already heard among the first 10 people, then you have a pretty good sampling of that group. So then you add another group to see how they differ.
mhm,
So this is really huge because when you get expectations really clear, especially not putting arbitrary segments or labels on things, but just
mhm,
letting the data bubble up and inform you naturally
mhm,
from how the customer sees things, that can be really paradigm shifting for your whole company and differentiate you in many ways.
mhm,
This is really gold for guiding so many things in the company. It becomes useful for corporate decisions. It
mhm.
becomes useful for every nook and cranny that doesn't touch the customer,
Sure.
and that's very overlooked these days.
That's so good. I had a CEO once at a Fortune 500 that felt like a lot of that unstructured data was anecdotal.
Mhm.
So he refused that stuff. And it's interesting because what I'm imagining in my mind as I listen is that some of that anecdotal data maybe can help drive what our then formal questions would be, what we really want to dig into. And I've
Exactly.
seen a lot of organizations, I've done it myself previously in my career where I just like, I want to ask this and put
Mhm.
some questions down on a piece of paper that aren't guided by any data at all. Really, I think probably there's a lot of bias in those questions that's, subconsciously steering them to the answer I want rather than this notion of curiosity, of listening to what's bubbling up and going, huh, that's interesting. I need to know more about that and letting
Right.
that kind of guide our research. Do you see that happening? And what would your response be to that of how to
Um,
do that better?
yeah, I applaud those few cases where it's happening, but it's kind of few and far between. I get a lot of insights by just testing my quantitative survey. So you have a quantitative survey, something that asks for ratings,
Mm-hmm.
test it. And how do I test it is I take the questions as word strips, and I might add other word strips that I'm thinking about
Mm-hmm.
and put them in an envelope, right? So then I'll go and visit a customer face to face and dump the envelope and say, please arrange these however you like. And I just zip it for the amount of time that it takes for them to make an arrangement. And I say, tell me what it means. I've also done this digitally where you can put word strips on the whiteboard and let them take mouse control and arrange things. It's very informative because as they say, well, these go together, or I didn't quite understand what these are, or, this leads to that, or this phrase is, kind of confusing to me. It,
Mm-hmm.
light bulbs go like crazy in my mind, and I get tremendous insights not only about how we should fine tune the questionnaire to be consistently interpreted by every participant, right? So
Mm-hmm.
when you do this with multiple people, you're figuring out how to make your survey more statistically valid, which is really important. If it's
Yeah.
not statistically valid, it has bias, is inconsistently interpreted, then your data isn't very high quality. And therefore, a lot of the things that you're trying to use CX Insights for are a little misguided.
Mm-hmm.
Not only that, I mean, all these light bulbs just lead to so many other things. We should be asking about this in the advisory board. Maybe we should be, doing more listening or sensitivity in our analytics for this other thing.
Oh my gosh, I love this. I'm a total geek about research and stuff, and I think I'm way better at it than I really am. I could play one on TV maybe, but but listening to you, I'm like, oh, this is so good. I love it.
Mhm.
One of the things that you mentioned in our other conversation also that I'd love to touch on here is you talked about the idea of creating a disposition report when we talk about our customers and where we're at. Can you explain what that is and what would be included in it and
Mm.
how you might use it in your role?
Yeah, so usually in customer service, they have a dispositioning report, which is saying these are the main topics that customers called about.
Sure. Okay.
Not every customer service group does it because of whatever technology they have or the pressures on the agents and whatnot. But
Yeah.
you can even do it after the fact by using text mining and that type of thing to categorize what are
Okay.
the topics, or using word clouds and that type of thing to
Mm-hmm.
figure out the the predominance of topics. And so, yeah, I mean, the whole thing is that usually those just stand alone as here's the facts, here's what happened, and it
Mm-hmm.
never goes any further.
Right.
And if you're able to put money on any of those numbers to
Mm-hmm.
say, this is a trend that's flat, it's just there, but know that we are spending at least this amount of money on these issues.
Mm-hmm.
Now it becomes much more interesting to executives instead of just a status quo that we're okay with. I think we desensitize our executives in the way that we show them the results. And are we really that comfortable with having that degree of repetitiveness in these issues? Wouldn't it be more interesting as a customer experience person at any level, the agents and so on, to not have so much repetitive issues? Uh,
That is a powerful statement right there. Rewind and listen to that again, people. We get kind of comfortable. We get numb to these really being issues because we've seen them so long.
mm,
When I was leading about 100-member call center, there were a lot of little areas where this showed up, and it was everything from, "Oh, well, yeah, we know that's a problem, but there's nothing we can do about it," kind of thing. And also when we were started to split into there and dive in, we realized there were definitions of first call resolution, for instance, what does first call resolution mean? It basically meant I'm getting them off the phone for
Mhm.
most of the agents. And so
Right.
I think that that's a really powerful point, is that knowing what is important to the customer, what they're saying, what continues to be this kind of low grade headache that now we're just accustomed to the pain. We just take a couple Tylenol and now we don't even pay attention to it. I think it's powerful. Good statement. I love that one. I wanted to talk a little bit about when we started our chat before, you talked about how in CX in general, you see this kind of mindset that has it backwards on what CX success is from and where the money should be focused and all of that. And you talked a little bit about investors versus customers, and that we end up getting our focus on the wrong thing, particularly if you're a public company. But I think I've worked in nonprofits too, and nobody will ever convince me that it is not all about money in a nonprofit as well. Almost
Mhm.
more so, because
Yeah.
they've got to scratch for every bit of it. So,
Mm.
can you talk a little bit about what you were thinking on that part,
Mm.
where we get it all backwards sometimes as a
Yeah.
CX?
So it goes back to what you were saying a moment ago, that we can't do anything about it.
Right.
Think differently,
Yes. So
right? You're thinking in a silo. So
good.
you're
Mhm.
in customer service and you're like, well, we can only really manage what our agents do. So we only want surveys to be about the agents. Almost every single survey that I do after a transaction like that, I'm like, why in the heck aren't they asking about the issue that I called about? That's what I really care about. The
Right.
agent is so secondary or tertiary in my interests, really. I know they're doing the best they can almost always.
Yeah.
It's just ridiculous. We need to be looking at customer experience as preventing the issue in the first place.
Oh,
Yeah. This is what I
great.
mean by automatic experience excellence. When I buy things, I have 1,000 things in front of me here in this room that I never really interacted with the manufacturer, never really interacted with the retailer, but a
Mm,
moment, and it's long ago. But will I recommend the things that are in this room? Yes. Even going to the blinds and the paint and the, whatever,
mm.
there's plenty of things in this room that I will recommend and rebuy the same things. And especially so if they were issue free, right?
That's so
So,
good. Oh,
when people have contacted service, there already was an issue. And if you're thinking about there's nothing we can do about it, that's crazy. Because if you think about everything else I've said,
mhm.
you are a value center for customer insights,
Yeah.
brilliance that you cannot get in any other type of survey. You're a value center for that.
Mhm.
So you need to have some kind of leadership in your service organization or wherever you're doing customer touchpoint management, customer success, sales, wherever you're doing your nucleus of customer management. Have some leadership people who can make friends with all of the other leaders in the company.
Mhm.
Figure out how you can channel customer insights to each of the originators of these issues.
Mhm.
Figure out how you can ask questions in your transaction surveys or whatever you're doing that help these originators to know more about the issue. We need to really get to thinking like we did when I started my career. How do we really improve our products and services and attitudes and policies and so on, the whole value proposition to deliver the one-to-one ratio between what we promised and what they got from the get-go, not just after something went wrong or something was confusing or the customer had a need to contact us.
That
That's
is
backwards thinking.
It is. Wow, that's powerful. And I can think of example after example where the whole focus was our numbers need to look right for our quarterly earnings call, rather than, and there was so much frenetic energy around that report
Mm,
and massaging everything so that the quarterly report was right. And there was so much less intense and concern about if we make this better for the customer, that is going to feed a better quarterly report for the investors. I love that.
Yeah, if you're in leadership and customer service, for example, you should take credit for turning the churn around, right? Turning the customer propensity to go with a different brand, at least for part of their purchases of
Yeah.
your area. So claim that. Look, we had this number of calls where we know that the customer was quite upset at the beginning and amiable at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, for those types of customers or this type of issue or the type of thing that they were calling about, that represents X amount of our revenue. Okay.
Yes.
So I'm claiming that we contributed this X amount of revenue to next month.
Wow, that's
If
good.
we had not intervened and saved the day with those particular customers, we would have lost it.
Right.
So claim that and redirect executives' attention to what you're really doing instead of figuring out how to upsell and cross sell people when they've already had a fail.
Right.
Kind of doesn't make any sense.
I had a situation recently with a software for our agency where I am so frustrated with it and it hasn't worked right. The things that were promised it at the sale aren't even features that exist yet
Hmm.
in the product.
Hmm.
And I'm locked into a 2-year
Hmm.
contract.
Mhm.
And so when I have brought up over and over and over again, this feature doesn't work as it's supposed to, this is not working, the analytics aren't whatever, every single time I'm met with oh, you have to upgrade to get that feature. And I'm just like, every single time I'm like, well, here's another $500 a month. Here's another. I'm just like, I don't want any more of your product until this base can get fixed. And so I think it's funny that you use that example that we want to, and I'll honestly, I attribute that to the wrong focus from leadership. They're
Well,
focused on
yeah,
upsells, not on the whole picture.
when you're looking at these stupid costs, so-called stupid
Yeah.
costs, you can start to see how much less pressure there will be on things like inflation, raising your prices, skimpflation,
Yeah.
reducing your quality,
Right.
shrinkflation, reducing what they get for what they paid, and frankly, flat out untruths in what they're going to get,
Mm-hmm.
and all this pressure to get things out prematurely as a product launch or minimally viable product. It's kind of a crazy way to manage things. I call it Jenga management. You're just, making holes, taking out the critical parts of your tower, and
Yeah.
then throwing it over the fence to post purchase experience, and then putting a traditional amount of pressure on that. I just see that investors will be a lot happier if we're doing our business management much more straightforward instead of all this craziness.
Sure. Well, and it's interesting from a financial perspective to think if we concentrated on producing a better product, we won't need 20 more call reps to take all the complaints,
Exactly.
to walk them through the solutions because
Yeah.
they're coming.
Yeah. If
Those.
you have more patience to use more agile check-ins with customers, do a better job with explorations, expectations research, and also have better feedback loops that you actually can act on and do rapidly, you would have a lot less churn.
Yeah, for sure. Probably of staff as well. I
Well,
would dare to guess.
trust is a real crisis. If you've been following the Edelman Trust Barometer or any of these other trust studies, you see that it really hasn't changed in all these years that we've been spending tremendously on customer experience. I would expect that trust is increasing
Mhm.
when we're trying to be more customer focused and we're spending, billions of dollars on
Mhm.
customer experience. And it's affecting employee experience. It's affecting everything, really. So be thinking about customer experience as driving trust, driving relationship strength, driving value continually increasing for customers. The only way you can do that is be looking at things more holistically and more from the angle of the customer and
Mhm.
investors.
That statement's going on a poster. I know that you shared that you did kind of a little bit of a pivot with your own professional career. Not so much the consultancy stuff as much as the education piece. And you mentioned in that time a lot of materials or resources that you have available. I'd love for you to touch on those, and we'll put the links in the show notes for sure. But what kinds of resources or educational opportunities do you have available if someone's interested in learning more? I think your wisdom is just deep and profound. And as I said to you earlier, I love that you've been in the field a long time, but you aren't holding on to old things that used to work. You have evolved with the industry. And I love that some of those foundational principles you started with are still the answer. So share with us how we can learn more.
Absolutely. Well, I could spend all my time consulting a few companies and on the road with conferences, doing keynotes, but all of that kind of exhausts me, the travel, the invoicing, the hurry up and wait, and so on.
Mhm.
What I've figured out in the pandemic time was I really like to show people how to do things like, teach them how to fish. So I decided to put all of my wisdom into small bite opportunities for you to absorb it
Mhm.
and apply it. And these small bite opportunities look like training, but they're actually e-consulting. So
Nice.
I've packaged all of these things that I'm talking about here and, you know, tons more
Mhm.
into 90-minute segments that you can get topic by topic as what I call e-consulting, but you might call it training. So that is at the foundational level, the intermediate level, and the executive and expert level,
Oh, nice.
all consistent but different bells and whistles as you go up
Sure.
every level. This makes it possible for whole departments or even, their extensions to
Mhm.
learn together in live sessions or in lunch and learns, extended staff meetings, and so forth, because they have online resources that are catered to each. So we have automatic experience excellence, experience management maturity, experience leadership for experts and executives, and then also the C-suite guide to experience management growth. That's a 2-hour session for them. In addition, there's a experience value exchange community. The experience value exchange community allows you to learn things in 5-minute bites, 20-minute bites every day because it's a subscription that you have all year.
Sure.
And that really focuses on ease of work and ease of business as aspects of how you make this influence happen. How do you get out of your silo? So
Mhm.
things like getting everybody on the same page, driving commitment, helping to influence respect for interdependencies, establishing a lifetime value mindset,
Yep.
and using customer insights for all the growth and cost opportunities in your company. That's what you get badges for as you learn those competencies in the experience value exchange at clearaction.com.
That sounds amazing. I've looked into a lot of certification programs for CX and training and this and that from a lot of well-known institutions. And there's some really valuable nuggets in there that I feel like are so practical. It's not
Mhm.
theoretical only.
Mhm.
Theory's good, we need to have it, but when it comes down to it, if you can't translate that into practical changes in how we're behaving in CX,
Mhm.
then we become part of the statistics that people are saying CX 60% of us can't demonstrate value to the organization or how our work connects to the organizational initiatives. And personally, as a senior-ish CX professional, that is a burden for me to help mentor the younger generations of CX folks who are coming up. It's not just about making a name for yourself. It's about getting the name of the customer center in that organization. And I feel like that some of the topics that you mentioned there, I'm like, oh, well, maybe I'll get my entire agency to watch, because we do CX with companies, but I always love to expand and learn.
Yeah. Think of it
So,
think of it as going to one of the big 3 consultancies and getting what their end result would be
mhm,
for almost free. I
yeah.
mean, really, right? You hardly spend any time, 90 minutes and maybe $100, and you've got really that caliber of richness to absorb and apply in your role to have much stronger influence across your company.
I'm grateful for those resources. I'm going to check them out for sure. So a couple things that you touched on that I just love and want to reiterate here is that the goal is to stop the problem from happening in the first place. It's
Mhm.
not just to make this person happier when they called. That is our immediate goal, but the long-term goal, as you said, is that aspiring to automatic service excellence. And I feel like if we can, yes, we have the short term fixes and goals before us always. I feel like sometimes as professionals, that's as far as our vision goes. We get to my COO's mad about this thing. So this is all my energy. Or now this KPI has dropped. So, oh, this is all my energy. But
Mm.
do you have any advice for individuals on how do you maintain that short and long term view in your priority as just as an experienced leader in the field? What are some things that you did to make sure you weren't losing sight of the forest for the tree?
Yeah, so if you're always looking at how much stuff costs, that is a good way to keep on target with maintaining a plan to get to the root of the issue, right? So you need to start getting more expertise or bringing in the people in quality or continual improvement who know how to get to the root of things and engaging them.
Mhm.
So keep directing executives' attention to what we call customer experience annuities.
Okay.
Customer experience annuities are where you resolve the root issue of something that's gone wrong and redirect that budget to higher value opportunities. That means that maybe you have more time for outreach to customers rather than responding to problems, right?
Mhm.
It means that your troubleshooting engineers are freed up to create new patents and things like that that continually give more value over the future. I mean, the list is endless about all the upside. So we have customer experience design where we're creating something. We have customer experience improvement where we're getting to the root cause and preventing those things and creating customer experience annuities, which can be way more growth generating in revenue than even design or the rollout of a new product in some cases. Actually, it can fund all of the above.
Okay. And the ability to look at that customer annuities, is that in some of your materials? So
Yes,
somebody was like,
absolutely.
I
It's
need
in
to learn.
chapter 1. It's in
Okay.
chapter 1 because what we're focusing on too much is the lagging indicators.
Yes.
Lagging indicators are customer scores like net promoter or customer
Yeah.
effort. First contact resolution is also lagging because it already happened. What we
Mhm.
need to be focusing on are things that we're doing that are mistake proofing the workflow, mistake proofing the outcomes that customers experience. So this
Good.
happens in customer service. It also happens in legal and procurement and facilities and HR and engineering and all the operational parts. Each one of them is probably contributing to some costs that are affecting customer service budget. So when we share the customer insights with all these groups and focus them on the top 2 things that they're causing to prevent recurrence,
Mhm.
and I call these customer critical factors. So the customer critical factors are what you put into your recognition program, your compensation program, things like that. Customer critical factors are in those people's workflows, case by case, defined separately, but call it customer critical factors. When they're making a certain percentage improvement in the customer critical factor, then give them applause, give them their bonus based on that. You
Mhm.
will know that your ratings are going to go higher and
Right.
your finances are going to go much more fruitful when you are mistake proofing things in the customer critical factor area. And that's the whole key to keeping the eye on the ball for the big picture as well as the continual gains right now.
Thank you for that wisdom. I appreciate it. I feel like I've learned a lot from you today, so I appreciate it. I'll look forward to checking out your materials. As I said, we'll have the links down in the show notes and how you can find them for yourself. Any last kind of thought or word of wisdom for brand new to seasoned CX folks in our CX Accelerator? We have thousands of
Mhm.
people around the globe. What's your final parting nugget of wisdom for them?
Yeah. Well, take a look at the other initiatives in your organization, things that have happened historically, things that are happening now. What were the success factors for those initiatives? How did they engage people? How did people maybe get turned off during those certain initiatives or leave it to just that little party that was doing things? What you're trying to do with customer experience is actually make it a way of life
Mm-hmm.
to across everybody because at the end of the day, your business is successful when you've met expectations or exceeded them. So, how do you understand the expectations? Customer experience. How do you exceed them? Customer experience.
Love it.
So, the whole idea is to get it right from the get go, and that becomes a company wide initiative where everyone needs to be involved. So, take a note from other initiatives in your company as how you want to approach customer experience for full engagement.
That's brilliant, brilliant insight. I hope you caught that, audience. And if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to Lynn, reach out to us. We're thrilled that you joined us today. Lynn, thank you for your time. We're grateful.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for letting me share, and I look forward to meeting everybody.